for the daughters of fire and soil, and for every wild flower who refused to be uprooted, to the mothers who spoke in seeds, to the lovers who tilled the land and each other's wounds, to the queer kin who made space where there was none, to silence and the voices that broke it, to memory for never forgetting. Chapter 1, Home in the Hills. Nestled between rolling hills and thorny acacia trees, a minimalist house stood like a white stone under the vast cloud-brushed sky of Kiunga Ridge. The structure, sun-bleached and quiet in its elegance, looked sculpted rather than built. Sunlight bounced off the clean lines of its flat roof and smooth concrete walls, softened by flowering vines that curled along the veranda railings and arched into the open kitchen window. Hummingbirds darted in and out of the lavender hedges, shimmering like tiny gods. From the backyard oven, a plume of wood smoke curled into the air, tangled with the scent of roasting spices and slow-drying tomatoes. Somewhere in the trees, a hornbill called out, its voice both comical and commanding. Inside, the house pulsed with life. Amina's hands moved with practiced grace as she kneaded dough on the large wooden counter. The slab was carved from a single piece of reclaimed cedar, its surface worn smooth by years of use. Amina leaned into the dough, fingers pressing and folding with meditative rhythm, her headscarf tied back in a loose wrap that exposed the graceful slope of her neck. Sweat dotted her brow. "More flour, Bibi," she called out without turning. From across the room, Lindiwe caught the request mid-spin. On it, she was barefoot, hips swaying to a mellow track echoing from the solar-powered speaker perched on the windowsill. She danced across the polished concrete floor like water in motion, the hem of her wrap skirt brushing her calves. A splash of turmeric marked her tank top. She paused just long enough to scoop a handful of flour from the jar, then flicked it across the dough with a flourish. "Perfect aim," Amina murmured without looking up. 10 points for the house chef, Lindy quipped, planting a kiss on her wife's cheek. Amina grinned, still focused on the dough. Around them, their children created their own joyous chaos. 5-year-old Jabari sprinted barefoot through the open-plan room, his mop of curls bouncing as he made a loop around the breakfast table. 3-year-old Nyasha trailed behind, holding a wooden spoon like a spear. Jabari, "Stop running," Amina warned not unkindly. "Mama, I'm being chased by a lion," he shrieked, barely slowing. Nyasha roared in response, her cheeks puffed out in the fiercest snarl she could manage. Lindiwe scooped her up in a surprised twirl. "No lions before lunch, little one," she said, blowing a raspberry against Nyasha's neck. The girl squealed and wriggled in delight. Amina dusted her hands and looked toward the window. The garden beyond was in full bloom. Amaranth and sukuma wiki stretched in neat rows, punctuated by the fiery heads of chili peppers and the wide, festy leaves of pumpkin vines. Bees hummed above the beds. At the far end, your neighbor Mumo was helping string up a fresh trellis for the tomatoes. His eldest daughter, Zawadi, crouched beside him, tying off vines with twine. Amina's gaze softened. "We should take them a jar of the plum preserves later. We can trade it for some of those wild mushrooms they found," Lindiwe replied. "Zawadi says they are the fat, meaty kind." We could make that stew again, the one with coconut and green cardamom." Lindiwe groaned with longing. "Say less." Just then, Jabari skidded to a halt beside them, panting. "Can we have mandazi, Mama? Please?" "You're already getting fresh bread," Amina teased. "But mandazi is different. It's soft and sweet," Nyasha chimed in, still in Lindiwe's arms. "Mandazi, Mama, please, with jam." Lindiwe glanced at Amina with a mock-serious expression. "The people have spoken." Amina rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth curled upward. "Fine, but you two have to help me roll them." "Yay!" the children squealed in unison. Lindiwe lowered Nyasha to the floor. "Go wash your hands, warriors. You can't fight flower monsters with dirty fingers." Jabari ran ahead to the tap outside, pulling the stool up so Nyasha could reach too. The siblings' laughter continued faintly in the garden. Amina leaned against the counter and stretched her back. "I never thought I'd be this happy," she said softly. Lindiwe stepped beside her, slid an arm around her waist. What did you think? I thought, she paused. I thought I'd have to choose. Love or place, family or freedom. But now, she gestured around. We built this with our hands on our own land, and we're not hiding anymore. Lindiwe rested her head on Amina's shoulder. We built a life that fits us, not one squeezed into someone else's shape. In the evenings, after the children are tucked in and the garden watered, Amina and Lindiwe sits on the back steps with mugs of baobab tea, with fireflies blinking in the dusk like shy stars. And sometimes they spoke of the land's long memory. I still can't believe we're here, Lindiwe murmured once, her head on Amina's shoulder. Do you remember the first time you saw this place? Amina smiled, eyes reflecting the moonlight. It smelled like hope and mango blossoms. They had built this life seed by seed, prayer by prayer. Not all had blessed them, not all had welcomed them, but they had come anyway, and they had stayed. Chapter 2. Smoke and Seeds. Amina was born in the bustling coastal city of Mji wa Bahari, where the sea sang through the alleyways and the call to prayer rose with the morning tide. Her childhood was spent amid spice markets and rooftop gardens, raised by her paternal grandmother, Mama Rehema, a stern yet loving matriarch who taught her to cook, pray, and question everything. Amina was quiet, always sketching gardens and homes in the margins of her notebooks. She studied architectural design at the University of Namibia, but her true love was food, particularly the kind that connected people to memory and place. Lindiwe grew up inland in the vibrant jazz-swept hills of Maporomoko, a small town named after its plunging waterfalls and wild fig trees. Raised in a large, boisterous family of musicians, midwives, and community organizers, she learned early on how to hold space and make noise. She left home at 17, traveling through villages with her traveling arts collective, painting murals and performing spoken word. By 22, she had earned a reputation as a cultural firestarter, queer, defiant, and disarmingly charismatic. They met at a permaculture and social justice retreat held in Kisiwakati, a quiet eco-island on Lake Ukerewe, known for its volcanic soil and ancestral shrines. Amina had come to teach sustainable oven building. Lindiwe was leading a workshop on land as narrative, exploring how stories could be mapped across soil and space. Their first conversation was accidental. Amina had burned her hand on a firestone oven and muttered a string of curses in Swahili under her breath. Lindiwe, passing by with a sketch pad and iced hibiscus tea, raised an eyebrow and said, "That's a lot of passion for someone making flatbread." Amina scowled. "It's for the community kitchen. I'm not making snacks." "Oh, you're one of the serious ones." "I'm one of the ones who knows what the fire means," Amina replied, eyes narrowing. Lindiwe smiled then, wide, disarming. "So do I." That night, under oil lamps and fig trees, they spoke until the moon rose high above the water. They talked of soil memory, food recipes, grief, hope, and what it meant to make a home with your hands. There was no flirtation, not yet, just recognition, like old languages remembering how to speak. After the retreat, they wrote letters, long, poetic ones, shared photos of recipes, tools, landscapes, then visits, first Lindiwe to Mji wa Bahari, then Amina to Maporomoko. They built love slowly, deliberately. The land at Kiunga Ridge. Years later, after a brief, bitter stretch living in the capital, where their rented apartment was vandalized and their landlord refused to renew the lease, they decided to leave the noise behind. Not in surrender, but in search of something truer. Amina had always dreamed of designing a self-sustaining home. Lindiwe wanted space to create, grow, and raise children of their own. They found Kiunga Ridge by chance, a remote patch of land tucked between the hills of Tundani province, flanked by thorny forests and fed by a forgotten river called Mtomweko. The soil was rocky but fertile. The sunsets looked painted. There was no power grid, no paved roads, just possibilities. The land had once belonged to a retired teacher named Babu Chalo, who had no heirs and had grown tired of the solitude. "You're not from here," he said, when they arrived to inquire. "No," Lindiwe replied, "but we know how to listen." He studied them, then nodded once. "Then maybe the land will answer you." They bought it with pooled savings, a small community grant, and the help of a queer cooperative known as Wavuli Circle, a grassroots network of artists, farmers, healers, and educators who supported queer and trans folks seeking rural sanctuary. It took 2 years to build a house, one to build a garden. But when the walls went up and the vines began to climb, they knew. This wasn't the place they found, it was a place that found them. Where the fire first spoke. It's evening at the house on Kiunga Ridge. The children are asleep. The wind outside smells of wood smoke and rain-soaked earth. Amina and Lindy sit on the veranda under a woven blanket, a pot of baobab tea steaming between them. Gazing out into the night, Lindiwe asked, "You remember Kisiwakati? That first night under the fig tree?" Smiling faintly, Amina replied, "How could I forget? You laughed at me for burning my hand." "I didn't laugh at you. I was charmed. You cursed like someone raised by sailors. Mama Rahima would have fainted if she heard me, but that oven wasn't cooperating. The clay was too wet, wind was too sharp. You were the most serious person at that retreat. Everyone else was barefoot and high on lemongrass tea. You were building a kill like the world depended on it." "It did, in a way." "We needed that oven for the refugee camp next season," Amina replied. "I know. That's why I followed you after the circle ended. You had this gravity, like you weren't playing, like you were already home, somewhere I hadn't found yet." A moment of silence stretches. Amina pours more tea, offers Lindiwe the first cup, then said, "You showed me a different kind of fire. Not the kind you stoke with wood, you know, the kind you light when you speak." "I just said you were cute when you were mad," snarked Lindiwe. Amina laughed. "No. You told me land holds memory. The trees remember the ones who touch them with care, and that blew my mind. You said that homes could be built like prayers, with lines and breath. I didn't understand it then, but I felt it." A soft wind passed, crickets hum. A distant hyena laughs once in the dark. Softly, Amina whispered, "And then came Jua." Lindiwe sighed. "Yeah. That year cracked something in us. The apartment, the looks, the threats on the gate. Even your mother stopped calling. She thought we brought it on ourselves, that if we'd just been discreet," Amina said sadly. Lindiwe reached over, taking Amina's hand. "But we weren't meant to shrink, love. We were meant to plant." Gosh, do you remember that ride up here? That broken motorbike? Babu Chalo almost didn't take us seriously. Until you said, what was it? I said, "We're not from here, but we know how to listen." That's all he needed. The old man just nodded like we passed some ancient test, Lindiwe said, laughing. "He told us the land was tired and that if we sang to it, it might bloom again." "Then we sang," said Amina softly. A long silence passed as the night deepened. Amina leaned into Lindiwe's shoulder, their fingers laced together. "I still hear it sometimes, the echo of those first nights. You reading poetry in the dark, me scribbling house plans on banana leaves," she continued. Lindiwe kissed her hand. "Now look at us. We've got soil under our nails, jam in the pantry, and 2 kids who think lions live in the living room." Amina smiled. "It wasn't a straight path, but it was ours. Still is." The wind shifted. From the garden, the scent of flowering basil filled the air. In the distance, thunder hummed like a memory returning home. And on Kiunga Ridge, 2 women sat beneath the sky they chose, listening to the land they'd learned to love. It's dusk, and the hills were quiet. The wind carried the dry ancient scent of acacia bark and cooling earth. Amina Lindiwe stood beneath a crooked fig tree near the edge of the land. The soil was dry but rich with promise. A stone path, half buried, winds toward a crumbling mud hut where Babu Chalo waits, seated on a carved stool with a faded kikoi draped over his shoulders. He watched him approach with calm eyes, tapping a walking stick against the toe of his leather sandals. "You still want it?" he asked them. "Yes, if you will let us learn it," Lindiwe said, nodding. "This land remembers every footstep, even the ones trying to forget. It's not empty. It never was." Amina stepped forward reverently. "We don't want to erase anything. You want to live alongside it, to build something honest. Babu Chalo studied them, two women, hands rough from labor, eyes weathered by defiance and tenderness. He stands slowly. Then kneel. They did. He reached into a worn leather pouch and draws out a small gourd. Inside is ash from the hearth his grandmother once cooked over, ground with dried herbs and river clay. He dipped his fingers into it, then smeared a single line across each of their foreheads. In this line is fire and soil, the ones who came before and the ones you'll feed. If you plant truthfully, if you speak to the land without trying to tame her, she will answer. He paused and turned to Amina. You carry home in your bones. Don't let fear make you forget the path back. Then to Lindiwe. You carry fire in your voice. Don't let silence become your shelter. He stepped back and opened his palm. Take her. She's stubborn, but she's alive, and she's been waiting. One morning, as mist hung low across Kiunga Ridge, with dew slick the leaves and an earth that was soft, open, expectant, Amina and Lindiwe knelt in the center of what will one day be their garden. No fences, no straight lines, just the arc of hills around them like folded arms. In a woven basket beside them are their first seeds, cowpeas from Amina's grandmother's kitchen, wild spinach gifted by Zawadi and her family, sunflower seeds Lindiwe carried in a cloth pouch, and pumpkin seeds wrapped in a poem Lindiwe once wrote, for the ones who bloom after fire and turn hunger into song. They pressed each seed into the earth with quiet hands. Amina whispered, she'll need water and patience. She'll need laughter and sweat and good trouble, Lindiwe added. She'll need us, not as owners, but as daughters. They covered the seeds gently with soil, then sat back, palms dirty, hearts open. The sun crested the hill, touching their shoulders with golden light. A small wind passed through the garden. Nothing bloomed yet. It was the first time Wildflower Kitchen left the comfort of MG Impana. Word had traveled farther than Amina or Lindiwe expected through song, rumor, and WhatsApp groups. A cousin of a friend had told a cousin of a mayor, and now they've been invited to Tamrini, a coastal hill town famed for its biennial festival of light. Tamrini was older than time, perched between ocean cliffs and mango groves, its streets lit with lanterns made of shells and recycled glass. For one weekend each harvest season, the town erupted with music, storytelling, crafts, and food, lots of food. Lindiwe had been hesitant at first. It's farther than we've ever driven the truck, and we don't know anyone there. But Amina saw something in the invitation, a chance to expand, to stretch their roots into unfamiliar soil. So they packed fresh ingredients, extra propane, backup solar panels, and a playlist. Jabari packed all of his chalk. Nyasha insisted on bringing her lucky spoon, which was really just a regular spoon with a sticker of a unicorn on it. The town greeted them with a blaze of sound and scent. Dancers in beaded skirts swirled past flame jugglers. Drums echoed through the narrow alleyways. Fabric stalls shimmered with dyed kitenge. The air smelled of roasted octopus, incense, and blooming baobab flowers. They parked Wildflower Kitchen beside a plaza lined with other food vendors, old-school street chefs with decades under their aprons. There was the famous Mama Rukia's coconut pilau, the no-nonsense Dengu Bros, and a rival food truck named the Spice Cartel, whose glossy branding made Lindiwe snort. Cartel really? She whispered. Sounds like they'll overcharge you and garnish your soul. Amina chuckled, tightening her head wrap. Focus. We're not here to compete, we're here to feed. By mid-afternoon, the line at Wildflower Kitchen snaked past the mango grove. The menu had been slightly adjusted for coastal tastes, cassava chapati wraps with smoky tomato sambal, spiced coconut lentils with lime-pickled onions, chili tamarind plantain skewers, frozen baobab yogurt pops for the kids. Lindiwe held the line with stories. She gave everyone a nickname, called the grandmothers queens of flavor, and dared the teenagers to outspice each other. Amina kept the kitchen flowing, even as humidity curled her hair. She worked like a poet, measuring without measuring, tasting without doubt. Jabari and Nyasha handed out popsicles and danced around with a group of local kids. The joy was real, the food was fire, and the name Wildflower was spreading. But not all applause was pure. Later that evening, a woman approached with a plate from another vendor and a camera crew. Her press badge read, Taste Trail TV host, Kamaria K. Mind if we film a short segment? She asked, flashing a too-perfect smile. There's buzz about you two. We love an underdog story. Amina hesitated. Depends on the angle. Kamaria chuckled. Don't worry. We're all about flavor and female power. But as the camera rolled, her questions took a turn. So, a queer couple running a food business in rural Kiriba. Do you worry about backlash? Lindua's jaw tightened. We don't cook politics. We cook food. Kamaria smiled wider. Of course, but you must admit, it's bold. 2 women, children, running solo out here. What kind of message are you sending to the more traditional parts of our society? Amina stepped forward, her voice even. That we exist, that we feed, that we love. And that's not a message, it's a life. Kamaria didn't flinch. Powerful words. The crew packed up and left without another comment. By nightfall, the interview clip had been shared across half a dozen media channels, some praising them while others throwing digital stones. That evening, after the fires died down and the plaza filled with soft music and floating lanterns, Amina and Lindiwe sat on the roof of their food truck, legs dangling over the side. Jebari and Yasha lay between them under a shared kitenge, dozing off to the lull of music and waves. Lindiwe sighed. You think we'll ever just be a food truck? Amina shook her head gently. No, and I don't think we ever were. They watched as a lantern rose, glowing gold, carrying a paper note tied beneath it. Lindiwe reached for Amina's hand. We're still wildflowers, aren't we? Amina smiled. Wildflowers don't ask permission to bloom. They just find the light. And in Tamrini, under a sky full of stars and paper fire, their roots grew wider.
This is QueerAfrique, where African queer stories bloom boldly. Subscribe to witness more. Share the story and let's gather around the fire. Until next time.